On today's episode of Big Sky Now, we discuss Big Sky players that made their mark in Week 1 in the NFL. Then we jump to Week 2 results that saw Montana kick off its season at home. And finally, we give our analysis for the upcoming Week 3 games with our weekly picks. Before we start, I want to thank M&C Tires for sponsoring this podcast. Let's get to it. Welcome, everyone. I am Luke Schmidt, your host of the Big Sky Now podcast. I'm very thrilled to be joined by Daily Interlake sports editor Fritz Neighbor, Daily Interlake sports reporter John Allen, Coeur d'Alene sports editor Mark Nelke, and Columbia Basin Herald sports reporter Mike Maynard. Let's not waste any time and get right to it, guys. Before we jump into Week 2, just wanted to give an update to those Big Sky fans that previous Bobcats quarterback Tommy Mellott has made his way down to the Bayou and is going to be joining the New Orleans Saints. Fritz, I'll ask you, do you see the Saints as maybe a better fit for Mellott, possibly using him like they've used Taysom Hill in the past?
Yeah, I think their coach or one of their officials made that comparison right away. Kind of a gadget player. Taysom Hill didn't play anything but tight end last season, then he got hurt. But that's a guy who's run for a lot of yardage at a Wildcat and caught a lot of passes, and he's a bigger version. The Raiders GM mentioned how much he liked Tommy. Loved the kid. Didn't have room for him. All the receivers came through camp healthy and became a numbers game. And he hoped somebody with more patience would latch onto him, and that's what the Saints have done. So the Saints aren't very good. Maybe better than expected. They played pretty well Sunday, and they got room on their practice roster to maybe develop Tommy Mellott into the player that I think we all know he could be at that level.
Yeah, I'm with you, Fritz. I could see them using him as a gadget. And like you said, Saints aren't looking up right now. They did play well Sunday, but I could see Tommy getting maybe more of a chance there. Speaking of Sunday, I'll just dive into really quick. Going from the Big Sky players making their mark in the NFL, I kind of just wanted to shout out if they do anything on Sundays. It's pretty special for them to do that. Weber State's own Rashid Shaheed had 6 catches for 33 yards for the Saints. Montana State's Alex Singleton had 6 tackles in their win over the Titans. If you didn't know, Singleton is also a captain for the Broncos defense this season. Eastern's Samson Ibukam, hopefully I said that right, had a sack in the Colts win over the Dolphins. And finally, who can forget Eagles legend Cooper Kupp, who had 2 catches for 15 yards on his Seahawk debut. John, I'm going to ask you, you're the Seahawks fan here. What did you think of Kupp's debut? Maybe only 15 yards. What do you expect from him this season? Does he have the same effect, really, that he had on the Rams?
I think, yeah, it's going to be just a guy who has some sure hands as long as he can stay healthy. I feel like just the offense in general was kind of a meshing together still for Week 1. First week that you actually go up against the number 1 defenses and everything like that. So with a new quarterback, the 2 running backs are definitely going to be the mainstays in Week 1 with that. But kind of Darnold finding his receivers a little bit, and I expect Cooper Kupp to have some reliable hands for him to throw to, along with Jackson Smith and Jigba, who should be up to the number 1 receiver this year.
Yeah, well said, John. It's exciting now that we have football on Saturdays and Sundays. So we'll be looking out for more Big Sky players trying to make their mark in the NFL, and I'll try and touch on them each week if anything happens. But we're here for the Big Sky currently for college football, so let's get to our recap of Week 2. Another weekend came around, and biggest game I thought of the week, we saw South Dakota State win in a dramatic finish over the Bobcats. The game really did come down to the inches as South Dakota State was able to get a 4th down stop in double overtime. John, I'm actually going to bounce it right back to you. What did you take from this game?
Yeah, I feel like it was the game that we looked at on paper, was the game that we saw out there. It was, good old-fashioned slobber knocker. Every team had to take advantage of every play that they possibly could. You saw the special teams make a big part, a block punt for South Dakota State, set up one of their touchdowns with a short field. Montana State getting the whatever you want to call it, kind of punt return. It did glance off his foot, kind of dropped it, but taking that in to tie the game up, it came down to a matter of inches on 4th and goal or 4th and 1 for Montana State. So, it just definitely was the game that we kind of built it up to be on paper throughout the week. And I felt like Montana State did a great job of establishing their run game, something that they couldn't do against Oregon. 210 yards, I think, on the ground is what I saw. Lamson had nearly 100 of that on his own. Julius Davis was really good when he got the ball. So it's a difficult defense, and I feel like a rematch of this game in December or January even is kind of on the radar.
Yeah, I could definitely see these two teams playing down the road like they have. Montana State falls 0-2. South Dakota State goes to 2-0. So looking forward to some next games. Should be interesting for those teams. We'll talk about that soon. Let's talk about Northern Colorado was so close to taking down Colorado State. Came down to an official review on a potential late touchdown catch for the Bears. It was controversial for some football fans. I saw it back and forth all over on saying if it was a catch. Fritz thinks it was a catch. I thought it was a catch. Real interesting call there, but that was a great game. The Griz overcame a slow first half to win their home season opener. I'll have Fritz jump to that game in a second. And Sac State was near a win over Nevada before they threw a late interception that ultimately led to their loss. But let's dive in more and hear from our panel on week 2. Let's jump to Mike. Mike was gone last week, so we're glad to have you back, Mike. Let's hear what you have to what you saw from Eastern Washington's loss to Boise State and any other games that you're watching. You're watching this week that you saw last week. Excuse me.
So I don't think anybody was expecting a whole lot from Eastern Washington against Boise State, a team that was in the college football playoff last year. From the very beginning, it looked like Boise State was moving the ball with ease, slipping tackles, cutting up the secondary a little bit. Not the best day for the defense. I think Boise State had about 630 yards total offense, and Eastern Washington had 293. But I think there are some positive moments, some flashy plays that they had that are worth mentioning. On their touchdown drive, Jared Taylor found, I believe, Miles Williams on a huge third down conversion over like 25 yards, I want to say. Before a few plays later, Taylor was able to use his feet to get in the end zone on his own. But he also stood out pretty well. I think he used his feet pretty well, avoided pass rush a few times, created space and time to move the ball downfield to convert to a first down or something like that. So, of all the possibilities, I think they did have some good moments to take away. I think something that they'll have to really work on. And it's kind of hard to give this critique just given the opponent that they had, but tackling is something I feel like they should work on. Just a lot of unfortunate big plays that Boise State was able to pull off, slipping tackles and getting into that open space pretty easily on their own. I think moving forward, just looking into that, but I feel pretty good about Taylor's ability to move. I think that's going to really shine throughout the rest of the year, and they'll be able to take advantage of that as time goes on.
Hold that thought, because I believe Taylor, if I'm not wrong, was hurt during the game. I'm not sure if you saw it, Mike.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, no worries. Like you said, you've been busy. But if you didn't catch that, I believe he was hurt. But we'll see. I don't know. Maybe one of you guys can touch on it. I haven't seen an update yet. But let's jump over to Mark. Let's hear your recap on the Idaho teams for week 2 and anything else that you saw.
Okay, well, I'll piggyback on Mike with Eastern. Just that I did see a little bit on Jared Taylor. I think he flew back on Saturday from Boise, and he's back with the team. But we have no update on how bad his injury is, how long he'll be out. So I guess we may never find out until Saturday when they take the field at Northern Iowa. So that's a big part of what they do. So you want to see him back healthy and playing and stuff like that. So that's the first thing we want. So anyway, Idaho Vandals bounce back. I think Idaho was basically a week 1 to week 2 type of thing where they kind of new team, new players doing what they do. Last week, I mean, WSU was the same way. Neither team really played that great. And we saw WSU just take it to San Diego State, and then Idaho looked a lot better against St. Thomas. St. Thomas they're not a bad team. They're not as athletic or big and physical as maybe some of the better teams in the Big Sky. So someone like Joshua Wood could even run more on them, and he threw for a lot too. Some of his best throws were on scrambles where he would scramble around and they'd run up to try to tackle him, and he'd throw behind him to some guy that was wide open down the field. So, so probably a little bit more of what Idaho should look like. Giving up 30 points to those guys is is a bit of a concern, but it's a win, and you move on. Then Idaho State, Cody Hawkins almost beat Jason Eck finally. He had a 22-17 lead, 10 minutes to go, and then New Mexico got a couple late touchdowns and stuff like that. Idaho State's without its starting quarterback, who's out for who knows how long. In college they don't tell you, so we'll see him if or when we see him again. But the couple quarterbacks, Jackson Sharman and then Davis Harson, and if you name Harson sounds familiar, that's the son of former Boise State coach Brian Harson. They had a guy with a great name named Sinatra, who kicked a 56-yard field goal. So you can't help but root for a guy like that. X now 4-0 against, or X beat Idaho State 3 times. First 2 were pretty bad, and last year was somewhat competitive. So that was good for New Mexico, good for Eck and former Vandal players and stuff like that, if anybody's still kind of pulling for former Vandal players down in New Mexico.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. Let's go over to Fritz. Fritz, you were at Washington Grizzly Stadium on Saturday night. What did you think of the home opener for Montana? And feel free to touch on anything else you saw in the Big Sky.
Well, yeah, that was it was a hot one. It was smoky. And I thought this year's Central Washington team would be a lot closer to that OA team that put a scare in the Griz, lost 38-35. 2021 during their spring season, they walloped them. The Griz did 59-3. And this team was talented. They had some dudes. They had a really good running quarterback that I thought the Griz did a nice job against, Kennedy McGill. I thought he might be a guy who threw for 200 and ran for 100, and they held him to the 70s on both sides. And their defense, which has all new starters, was bringing the wood, but they weren't wrapping up very well in the first half. Cole Phillips took a tackle that was way too high and went 31 yards, and they're ahead in the second quarter. The Wildcats were 14-10, and then they got the ball back, and then threw in some tip drill interception that Brett Fisk is not very happy about, the CW coach. But things changed in the second half. Things really changed right then. But in the second half, they held the Wildcats, the Griz defense did, to 67 rushing yards on 23 carries. And it was kind of the opposite in the first. And Chris Fisk was he really wanted a PI call on that interception, and he'd gotten a couple already on that side of the field. Maybe that's why he threw back there, but he didn't get it that time. And then the Griz were able to turn things around. They got Drew Deck open down the seam for a 50-yard touchdown pass. Glacier high zone. Drew Deck, so shout out to him. I thought he had 2 touchdowns because he tore off a long punt return, but it was called back. I think you'll see him and or Michael Wortham break some special teams plays for him. And as for the Cats, I think we talked about special teams, how that was an issue. They had a punt block for the second straight week. And then that 4th and 1 play where they couldn't find room for Julius Davis to get the first down in the second overtime. Pretty critical play right there. And then they gave up the touchdown pass. And Davis might show up better at Husky Stadium. They lost 6-3-10. A guy named Jonah Coleman had 5 rushing touchdowns against the Aggies. Corey Dillon shared the school record way back in '96 with a guy named Hugh McElhenney, who Mark might know. I don't know. They call him the King. He was that good. He was before my time. I think he was before Mark's time too. And
a couple of years.
And then I was when I jump on the pod, I was still looking for any sort of press conference from that Colorado State game, because I really want to know what the coaches had to say about that touchdown pass that wasn't, because it sure looked like a good catch. A good enough catch that there wasn't enough there to overturn it, but they sure did. And so the Rams escape Ed Lamb. And I think Ed Lamb's doing a nice job recruiting some good players for Northern Colorado.
Yeah, I agree, Fritz, and I still think it was a catch, but we'll be talking about them next week as they have an away game and see if their season's going to be looking on the up. John, let's go to you. Were there any other games we haven't mentioned that caught your eye? And feel free if you want to touch back on the Montana or any other games.
Yeah, I'll quickly kind of touch on a couple that you guys have mentioned. I'll hop on the I think it was a catch train for Northern Colorado. Watching that in there, I didn't see anything on how they could overturn it since it was ruled a catch on the field. But I'm not an official, so that was definitely. I know Luke was looking on X, and he saw a lot of controversial posts about that. So it seemed like it caught a lot of people. And with Montana, I just want to say I loved the play of Wortham over Saturday. It seemed like he was everywhere on the field. Punt returns out wide. Put him in the backfield a couple times, I believe, as well. So I think that's a great addition for Montana. I know Fritz kind of mentioned the Eastern fans saying we stole their favorite player, and I totally understand it now because he is a do everything kind of player on offense and special teams. So it's looking elsewhere. I had my eye on Northern Arizona early on against Utah Tech. When I first turned it on, Northern Arizona was up by 2 touchdowns. I think they extended it to 3 touchdowns at one point, but the Trailblazers kept battling back. Ty Pennington threw a pretty a momentum shifting interception there in that early on in the second half, and I think that's what gave Utah Tech a nice bit of momentum to pull it back within a touchdown and stay in the game. Utah Tech again kind of throwing that early Big Sky schedule together before joining the conference now. Let's see what else. Sacramento State, we haven't mentioned them. They were right in it with Nevada for majority of the game. Pick 6 late there, 2 minutes to go was what sealed it for the Wolfpack. So a good performance for them after their flop against South Dakota State week 1. And then looking ahead for Montana, they play North Dakota this week. North Dakota also played Portland State this past week. 50-20 outcome for the Hawks to win that one. Portland State's offense has kind of struggled, but they did finally get on the board after 2 shutouts. So getting 20 points up is maybe things looking a little bit upwards. It's not going to be a great year, I think, over in Portland. But if you're going to take positives, that's one thing to look at.
Yeah, I'm with you, John. Don't think it's going to be quite the year that Portland State wants. And jumping back to Montana, really excited to see Wortham and Deck. As we know, the wide receiver room's looking a lot different from last year. And after the first game, I'm really impressed. I thought Ayat had some beautiful thrown balls compared to last year. I think he's taken a small step, and I think he'll continue to get better this year. So I was definitely intrigued to see that. And Mark, I'm going to ask you a question. I want you to give me one team. I'm going to put you on the spot. Give me one team you are most impressed with so far.
Oh. And I don't know, Montana maybe. I mean, it's hard to tell one game. Eastern.
Tough question with only 2 weeks. I know.
Yeah. I didn't study for this test. I'm sorry.
I wanted to get the reaction right away.
There's a lot of teams that have kind of disappointed. Eastern kind of. There was a time when Eastern playing Boise would have been maybe a shootout, and Eastern's down now, and plus Boise coming off their loss to South Florida, which they're trying to spin into a positive now that South Florida beat Florida. You kind of knew that Boise was going to put it on them, and poor Eastern kind of had to take it. So I was going to touch on it later, but maybe the surprising, maybe Utah Tech and Southern Utah. They're not in the league yet, but they're kind of showing that when they join, when that team in Northern California leaves, I can't remember their name. It's going to be still pretty competitive Big Sky and a lot of good teams.
Definitely, Mark. Fritz, let's end this recap. I got another question for you on the spot. I just wanted to get your natural reaction. What teams do you expect to start winning more after their early season struggles, Fritz?
Well, I just mentioned how Northern Colorado looked pretty darn good. So that stuck out to me. The league hasn't really, when you look at the overall records, how the preseason has gone, there hasn't been a lot of wins. It's too bad that either Sac State or Northern Colorado, those would have been big wins for the conference, built some cachet up. my MSU, it's no crime to lose to South Dakota State, but it's been a while since we beat them. The Dakota State seem to be just kind of running the table against the Big Sky lately, and it'd be nice to see that change and help the Big Sky's future down the road. As you look toward the postseason, they still have 5 teams ranked. I'm not sure it should be that many at this point. Sac State is still ranked by some miracle. So I'll just stick with Northern Colorado for now. That's my team that I'm kind of interested in. I have to let go of my Idaho State Bengals and adopt the Northern Colorado Bears.
Fair enough, Fritz. Let's jump now to week 3. Some key games this week, in my opinion, start with North Dakota traveling to Missoula to take on Montana. Personally think that'll be a great game. As you just said, Northern Colorado, they're going to face South Dakota. We will see if the Bears are actually, looking up this season, as we just discussed. Northern Arizona and Idaho will play future Big Sky teams, Southern Utah and Utah Tech. I think those games can be close. And lastly, can Sacramento State and Weber State earn their first wins of the season? So let's start our preview discussion with Mike. Mike, tell me if you're thinking Eastern Washington will also get its first win this week, and any other games you're going to be paying attention to.
Yeah, I find it a little hard to believe Eastern Washington's going to bounce back this week, especially with the quarterback situation. I think if they have Jared Taylor, one thing else I like from that Boise State game, they seem brave enough to call some creative plays, some sweeps, some motions they worked in there. So if it's that kind of setup, they have Jared Taylor. I think they'll compete, but I feel like I lean more towards Northern Iowa for this one. And I suppose for other competitive matchups, let's see. I'm kind of interested to see Idaho versus Utah Tech. Just the way that Utah Tech kind of made it close at the very end, and Idaho has looked good. That first week against Washington State, though they lost, kept it 3-point loss, only allowed 13 points to Washington State, and then handled business against St. Thomas as well. I think that'll be a good matchup. So I guess I'll keep my eye on that one.
Yeah, John, what are you watching for week 3 inside the Big Sky?
Yeah, Washington Grizzly Stadium is going to be rocking again. It's the only top 25 matchup in the FCS this week with both ranked teams. So it gets number 5 versus number 18 after the new poll came out today. So I'll definitely be on that one. I want to see if Aya can keep up his play at quarterback. I think he looked great throwing the ball downfield this last week. So probably one of the better games I've seen him play as a throwing quarterback and not just as the dual threat. Montana State, finally getting out of that rough start, 2 absolutely incredibly difficult opponents the first 2 weeks for them. They get San Diego at home. So the Bobcats should finally be able to settle in and start preparing for conference play. Mike mentioned Utah Tech and Idaho. I got that one down on my board as well. Utah Tech, as Mark said too, has looked great to start the season. So kind of showing that they're going to come into the Big Sky with the compete, not just roll over right away. And then Northern Arizona and Southern Utah, I think it's going to be a great game down in Cedar City, future conference matchup as well. Northern Arizona only won by 7 last week. Southern Utah's already taken down Idaho State. I feel like that should be a really good game also.
Fritz, the floor is yours. Let's hear what you got to say.
Well, I wasn't going to spend much time on anybody besides Griz, North Dakota, because it is the top 25 matchup of the week. And I watched quite a bit of the Fighting Hawks win over Portland State, and they look pretty salty. And we should mention that they had K-State on the ropes and gave up a touchdown and with 46 seconds left to lose in Kansas. So that was week 1. That was the first start for their sophomore quarterback, Jerry Kaminsky. He ran and threw really well Saturday, although Portland State isn't quite there. Their best player is playing for Montana, Peyton Wing, their best player from last year. And but in addition to the sophomore quarterback, they found a 6'6" freshman tight end named Nathan Ramaka, who's amazing. He got 2 touchdown passes. Like, where do they find a guy like that? And the answer is Maple Grove, Minnesota. I don't know what he's doing playing for the Fighting Hawks instead of maybe the Golden Gophers, but there you go. And they seem to be in the same mold of the Dakota States. They're big and they're physical and they They've pushed the people around and ran the ball well. And then there's their special teams because they went down and scored. They kicked off. They forced the foam on the kickoff. They recovered. They scored, which means Portland State, which still hadn't scored a point, was down 15-0 without running an offensive play. And so then pretty soon they 3 and out, and it's 22-0. And on one of those touchdowns, the North Dakota ran a swinging gate for 2. And then when the Vikings finally scored, they blocked the PAT. So their special teams are great on top of everything else. It's going to be a really tough matchup for the Griz on Saturday.
Definitely can't wait to watch that one, Fritz. Mark, I'll move to you. Let's hear your thoughts on the Idaho and Idaho State matchups for Week 3, and feel free to jump in on anything else.
Okay, well, first I'll piggyback a little bit on Fritz talking about the Minnesota kid playing for North Dakota, and not to say what's going to happen in the future, but when you see somebody playing for one team this year, you might see him playing for a little bigger team next year. So not saying that's what happened there, but anymore, that's kind of the jaded world we live in, especially in the Big Sky, where if you have a good year in the Big Sky, then pretty soon you end up in FBS somewhere. So anyway, Idaho trying to make it 2-1 against the college formerly known as Dixie State. I'm sure y'all remember Dixie State, and it's probably when you hear Utah Tech, where did Utah Tech come from? Then you have to Google it and realize they used to be called Dixie State before the political correctness set in. But anyway, the Trailblazers of Utah Tech, Trailblazers one word, not like the Portland Trailblazers, which is 2 words. Couple 7-point losses, 7-point loss to UC Davis, 7-point loss to Northern Arizona. So like I said earlier, them and Southern Utah, they're going to step right in and be competitive in the Big Sky next year. But this is this year. Idaho State, say they're one of the maybe the best 0-3 team in FCS, which it probably doesn't make them feel any better, but they are 0-3, and that one loss the week ago could come back to haunt them when it comes down if they're in an at-large on the fence bid for a playoff at the end of the year. Anyway, they're idle this week, and then they play Lincoln of California next week. Kind of curious about Eastern at Northern Iowa. I'm not sure that they, with Taylor, they have a better chance. Obviously, Northern Iowa's 1-1. I think Eastern could be in for another long year. They play well, but not. They kind of don't have the same horses they've had in the past when they were one of the best teams in the Big Sky.
Yeah, well said, Mark. Going to be an intriguing Week 3. Excited to watch football again Saturday. It's been so nice having it back. But speaking of Saturday, let's make our picks. I'm going to start this week. Last week I went 10 for 11. So far I am 18 correct picks out of 22 games in the 2 weeks we've done picks so far. I'll go ahead. So I'm going to start, and I'll take. I'm actually going to take Northern Colorado this week. Kind of have a soft spot for them on the podcast. So I like what I've seen, and I felt like that was a catch last week. So I'm going to ride with the Bears. I think Montana will come out a little bit faster this week in the first half versus North Dakota and improve to 2-0 on the season. I'll take Montana State to bounce back big over San Diego to get their first win. Utah Tech and Idaho could be close. But since Idaho is at home, I'm going to take the home team and go with them. Unfortunately for Eastern Washington, their QB was injured last week, and we're not too sure, like we said earlier, about the update. So, kind of have to take Northern Iowa. I think Eastern is going to start out 0-3. I think McNeese will beat Weber at home. I have Cal Poly over Western Oregon. Next game had me thinking for a little bit, but I am going to take Northern Arizona over Southern Utah. I have Sac State beating Mercyhurst. And finally, still don't believe in Portland State, so give me Hawaii. Fritz, you went 9 for 11 last week, brings your total tied with me, 18 for 22. Let's hear what you got.
Okay, well, I picked mostly home teams, but we'll start Montana over North Dakota. MSU way over San Diego. That's a team out of the non-scholarship Pioneer League. I'll take South Dakota over Northern Colorado, Idaho over Utah Tech. I'll take Northern Iowa over EWU. I picked Weber to win at McNeese, Cal Poly over Western Oregon, NEU to win at Southern Utah, Sac State over Mercyhurst, and then Hawaii over the well-traveled Portland State Vikings.
Perfect. John, got to give you a shout out. You were perfect last week. So congratulations on that. That's very impressive. So far, you are 21 of 22. So just got to give you a shout out. 2 weeks. Very good. Go ahead and tell us what you're thinking for week 3. I might have to start paying attention to your picks a little more.
Well, now that you pointed it out, it's going to go all downhill from here. But I'm going to go with South Dakota over Northern Colorado. South Dakota did get upset by Lamar last week, but I think they bounced back. They were ranked number 4 last week. I didn't see where they fell to, though. Montana, I got them at home over North Dakota, but like Fritz mentioned, I think that's going to be, great matchup. Should be a close one. Definitely the matchup of the week in the FCS. I've got Montana State at home over San Diego. I also have Idaho over Utah Tech. I'm going to take Northern Iowa at home over Eastern. I'm going to take Weber State on the road, though, at McNeese. I feel like the Wildcats get their first win of the season on that one. Cal Poly over Western Oregon. I, too, am going to pick Northern Arizona. I'm rolling with them as my, co-Big Sky champions to take down Southern Utah now. I've got Sacramento State over Mercyhurst and Hawaii over Portland State.
Great. Thank you, John. Mark, you only had one game wrong last week, just with the Cats losing. You had that one, but you're still 20 of 22, so you're doing great. Let's hear what you got.
Okay. Mostly home teams, actually probably all home teams. South Dakota to beat Northern Colorado. Montana over North Dakota. I think North Dakota beat Montana last year, so they got a little payback in them. So I remember Montana State gets their first win. Idaho over Utah Tech in a close one. Like to see Eastern win in Northern Iowa, but like you guys talked about the quarterback situation, we're just not sure. So I'm going to take Northern Iowa at home. Weber needs to still show something, so I'm going to take McNeese at home. Might be the first time we picked Cal Poly ever, but we'll take them over Western Oregon. Probably let's go with Southern Utah at home over Northern Arizona. Sac State, as much as you kind of like to see Mercyhurst come out there and beat them, especially after Sac State lost to Jeff Cho to Post Falls and St. Mary's and Montana Western fame. And at Nevada beating them last week, I'll take Sac State over Mercyhurst, and hopefully Portland State has a good time at Hawaii, at least before the game anyway. I'm going to go with Rainbow Wahine in that one.
Mike, we'll finish with you. You were gone last week, but I did give your picks. You went 9 for 11, so you're tied with me and Fritz, 18 out of 22 so far. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think I'm feeling good about riding with Northern Colorado. I'm going to, I guess, kind of go against the grain a little bit here. I liked what I've seen so far. I think Montana will hold it down at home. Montana State over San Diego. I'm going to go with Idaho over Utah Tech in a close one. Going to go with Northern Iowa, especially also being on the road. Just doesn't really favor the Eagles over there. McNeese over Weber State. Cal Poly over Western Oregon. Northern Arizona over Southern Utah. Sac State over Mercyhurst, and Hawaii over Portland State.
Thank you, Mike. Well, that should do it for this week's episode. I just want to thank my panel for joining me today and doing their hard research. I really appreciate their time. And please like, subscribe, and comment on this video. Would love to have some interaction with some fans and even give your own picks below. I would love to see that. But that should do it for us today. Thank you for watching Big Sky Now, and we will see you next week.
M&C Tire in Kalispell has been locally owned since 1979. From urban avenues to untamed trails, M&C Tire will help you conquer any terrain. Unleash the power within your ride. Stop into M&C Tire at 1271 North Meridian Road in Kalispell or mnctire.com. M&C Tire, wherever you go, we've got you covered.